Because I had that
Stupid
error.
texts keep coming through.
Yes. Sorry. Cool. All right, Mike, we can get this thing started if you are ready.
Yeah, I'm fine, man.
Awesome. So if all the
Get
everybody
ready.
just tuning in, we just sent our push alert on our new 6 app, and you see we have a really special guest here. Of course, everybody in Florida knows you, Mike. This is Mike Boylan, sorry, of Mike's weather page. Thank you so much for being here, Mike. This is awesome. We can get together to do this.
Yeah, we met at the summit there a couple weeks ago, and
Yeah.
really excited. And I'm not able to do live on my little gig that I do today because I'm mobile. I'm in Panama City Beach heading home, but now this is better. I get to do one with you.
Hey, and no, I appreciate it. On the road, even, Mike. We'll just start off. Of course, we know that it's expected to be anyway a really busy season. We've seen almost every single forecast entity out there issue these forecasts that are either up there with the top they've ever done initially, or whatever. You were saying that you were when your travels up in the Panhandle. We were just talking a second ago, but tell me a bit about what you encountered with the folks in the Panhandle, talking about Hurricane Michael.
Yeah, I was up here at the Gulf Coast Jam, big concert, and we got to go last year. This year, it's a lot of fun. But so many locals from the 850 zip code, went through Hurricane Michael, and I obviously met a lot of fans that found the page back then. But being 6 years later, they replaced the name this year to Milton, so it's kind of hard to imagine that was 6 years ago. You still see damages up here, but talking with the locals, it's always amazing to me how storms unite communities. And there's if there's any good from a storm, it kind of brings communities together, and just sharing that moment that some never experience or might be your only time ever experiencing. It just feels like a really strong connection here, and just talking with the locals about Michael and their stories. It seems like yesterday, but it is still just hits home for me that what they went through up here, and of course every town that's went through something like a major hurricane. But yeah, so it's
Absolutely.
just a reminder, um, hurricane season's here. It just seems like every year we're getting one of these big storms lately, and they just pick a spot, and it seemed like it all started with Harvey, right? We had Harvey, and
Right.
then every year since we've had some sort of storm.
It's wild. So, of course, everybody's probably seen this by now, whoever's tuning in. I mean, NOAA forecasting 17 to 25 storms, their highest ever. Colorado State coming out with their highest forecast ever. And it's no secret. Mike, I know you've been posting a lot on your page about the water temperatures off the coast of Florida, and it's pretty wild that we're talking about temperatures 90-ish degrees or a little bit cooler
Yeah,
than that, upper 80s in at the end of May, early June.
yeah, and, yeah. I started tracking back in February. It seemed like we've been above average even in the winter months. So it never really had a chance to cool down. And yeah, these ocean heat content numbers, the sea surface temperatures. I know that's I think some folks are getting tired of it because that's being Floridian myself, a native. I think a lot of that tone is like just until something happens, let's not keep talking about it. But it is fascinating to me seeing these water temps, and I mean they go off of a 30-year anomaly, or 30-year averages basically. So it's not where it's normally at, and that's the big unknown.
So yeah, and I have that tropical fuel map or that tropical cyclone heat potential that you were talking about, and this is essentially, of course, the measure of not just the sea surface temperatures, but how deep that warm water goes. And we're talking about, of course, June 3rd, officially in hurricane season, but that heat potential for tropical systems to use is more indicative of what it should be on August 17th.
Yeah, that's crazy. And I mean, you know, last year the water was almost record heat.
Hmm.
But I think the big unknown was we were in El Nino last year, a lot of wind shear. This year we're not. So I think that's what's got all the forecasters a little puzzled. Like, okay, we got this water temp. Now we have El Nino, which is no wind shear. What's going to happen? And I hate seeing anomalies to the year 2020. or 2005. A lot of folks compare back, where we're at, what it looks like comparing other years. So I don't know it. I mean, I tell Floridians, I think we're no more or less, or no more, subject to storms. It seems like, we've had storms during El Nino years, like last year, and 2018 was an El Nino year. So I think Florida's always at risk. Maybe what we're going to see this year is a little more East Coast. I'm reading a lot about that Bermuda High being a little stronger, and that might push a little more upper Gulf, Western Gulf storms. They really haven't had a season in a while. So the East Coast hasn't had anything in forever, it seems like. So you don't want to say they're due, but
they kind of are.
They're due.
Unfortunately, right. You never want to wish it on anybody, but you try to pick out the patterns at this stage in the game. And there's the La Nina. I mean, it's I guess technically still in El Nino, but you see the sea surface temperature anomalies out in the equatorial Pacific, and I mean, La Nina, it's coming on strong. Right. It's crazy.
Yeah. And I tell you what, like, I've never really followed it for wintertime, but our jet stream, El Nino we had during this winter, it's crazy. Like, even talking to locals up here in the Panhandle, I think they had the second most tornado warnings of the whole country up here. And that was exactly what was forecast, strong jet stream. And we had a really crazy southeast winter with storms. And so it's amazing. It's always amazing to me that the Pacific controls so much weather here in the Atlantic with the water temperatures.
It's wild. It's hard to believe. And I know at least through January or through late December, it was the cloudiest winter on record for the state of Florida, going back 84 years since that record, or since that data was. So, I mean, it was everything the El Nino was cracked up to be and more. And unfortunately, as you mentioned, that brought those really, really nasty storms. Mike, one of the things you mentioned about that Bermuda High, and one of the things that at least it's starting to go away a little bit, but a couple of weeks ago we had that colder anomaly here, and it's kind of fizzled out just a little bit. But certainly that would help to argue as well for that kind of high pressure sitting right here, which is, of course, we do not like, because that's going to help to push things further west. And I mean, you know it as well as I, when you're talking about La Nina too, you mentioned the other tracks. They seem to be a little bit more impactful, even though that Florida seems to be sticking out like a sore thumb even in El Nino, but we get a lot of that stuff in the Caribbean as well.
Yeah, I mean, we get it from both sides, and especially you guys being in the middle of the state. I mean, it's, we're in a really unique spot, and it's, we talk a lot I do a lot of these hurricane expos and evacuations, in Orlando, that all started in 2004, right? You all got hit from both sides. We had storms coming through the east, coming through the west. And that's why I always think Florida's kind of the same risk level any year, this year, maybe the East Coast with this west push, we got to watch. And, of course, late season stuff. And, of course, you look at all the anomaly maps, too. And, precipitation models are, already starting to see tropical waves out there. And, I don't really follow them as much, but I'm, learning more and more about historically these tropical waves are a little early this season, which could be what they were showing, a lot of rains from Africa. No, not the Toto song, but we're seeing a lot of action pumping already from Africa. And again, what we got to worry about being Floridians is really the Western Caribbean and Gulf. And I mean, Eastern Atlantic waters don't really affect us, but we got to worry about late season storms, and that Caribbean is hot. And, once October rolls around or late September, that's when everybody stops talking about hurricane season. That's when we really should, because that seems to be like when Floridians start to have more of a risk.
Yeah, that Central American gyre kicks back in again, starts spitting some out, and you said it. The water temperatures in the Caribbean don't really cool off at that point. Those cold fronts don't really make it there. Mike, you mentioned 2004, and not to keep you around too long. I know you're a busy guy, and I really, really appreciate you tuning in from the road. 2004, obviously 20 years ago, that was a huge, huge hurricane year for the state of Florida. Also for you, that's when Mike's weather page got going, correct? Can you talk a little about how this started? I find that story fascinating, just for the people who may not know, but I'm pretty sure that everybody tuning in knows Mike weather page.
Well, thanks for that. But no, 2004, we lived up in Tampa Bay, and Charlie was coming, and uh, nobody knew what to expect. I mean, I forget this stupid story, but we put masking tape on the windows then. Like, we didn't know what the hell we were doing, you know? I mean, we had a Cat 4 heading right to us, and we're like putting masking tape on the windows. But I was trying to find information on the net, you know, spaghetti models specifically, and I got frustrated because I couldn't find them back to back. So I just built that web page, and ironically, I was going to USF and was learning HTML website design. So I was like, well, I'll just use a project to build a website, and called it Mike's Weather Page. And it was mainly because I wanted a place to see all these graphics that I got tired of looking for. You know, I was like, I'm gonna put them on one page. That way I can keep going back to it. And yeah, so, you know, then 04 came, and we had Gene and Francis and Charlie and Ivan. And then the next year, you know, we had, I think, was that Wilma that year? I can't keep up, but
no, you're right. Well, that was Wilma. Yeah. Wilma and the trees and all that stuff.
Oh my God. So yeah, that was kind of how it started. It was just mainly, I shared it with friends and family, and never dreamed it would, you know, compound to where it's at today. It's still the same theories for today. I'm using it just to have a place to go, and you know, for me to have a one-stop shop for links.
That's fantastic. No, I love it how it just turned to be something just to do to find the information, and then a lot of people found it and find that super helpful. One of the things I know that you are big on is the evacuation thing. I know you said that you've kind of changed your tune on that from back in the day to where you are now, and just kind of after seeing what these things can do firsthand and being impacted by so many storms.
Right. Yeah, I joke I've become the Debbie Downer, because I'm the guy screaming to evacuate now, and you know, I believe it, I see it. You know, coastal areas, especially with surge, you know, we saw with Ian. So I think my tone has shifted a little bit this season to don't be stubborn, and you know, Floridians are very resilient, and we don't like to be told what to do. And I think I'm pretty much going to change my outlook this year, and just let people decide for themselves. But, you know, show them, hey, this could happen. This is what it's going to be like. You know, the looting, the smells, the lack of power, you know, just things that maybe people don't think about. And then hopefully they'll make smart decisions and evacuate. Because I'm worried about the coast. I mean, I saw what, you know, Ian did down in South Florida, you know, living in Tampa Bay. I don't think people, you know, the thing that scares me is we had Irma and it turned. And someone in Pinellas County told me they roughly had 20,000 beds, shelter beds, and maybe 17 or 18,000 were used. And then Ian came around. I think they said only 2,000 or 3,000 were used. And my city of Oldsmar, the same thing. They use the city sewage water as a test on evacuations. And during Ian, they determined only 20% reduction in sewer usage. Kind of told the story that 80% stayed behind. And Weather Channel even picked that up and thought that was a fascinating way to see how many people evacuated. So I think Floridians are just tired of evacuating, you know. They think it's going to turn because they all turned. And I think is this that if we get one that doesn't turn, you know, it's going to be bad. I mean, the population levels on the coast have just absolutely skyrocketed. You know, when you decide to leave, it might be too late. The traffic, you know, it's nowhere like it was in 2004. It's, you know, the people down in Fort Myers told me they decided, you know, to evacuate, and it was too late. The roads were jammed up. They had nowhere to go. They didn't have a plan. They didn't know where to take their pets. There was just, you know, they're like, well, we just got to go back home. So it was scary. You know, you got to have a plan. I mean,
and that's a great point. Obviously, forecasts aren't perfect. We don't claim them to be 100%. We know there's still wiggle room. The wobbles matter, especially when you're dealing with those stronger ones. Unfortunately, like Southwest Florida has had to deal with a couple times over the last 20 years. But it's always better to get out. And like you said, it's the after effects. I mean, FEMA and the Florida Division of Emergency Management talk about all the time, and NOAA, the National Weather Service, always talk about that it's the after the storm. That's where most of the fatalities are happening now, even because it's just still too dangerous to be around and walking around post storm. So it's just important to just listen to what some of those officials are telling you.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know, one thing I heard with Michael, which is fascinating to me, I've heard this more than once. The first forecast came out, it was a tropical storm hitting the Panhandle. And a lot of people just turned the TV off, you know, and I heard this weekend, I think 3 different times people went to bed. It was a 2 or, you know, 1 or 2, and they woke up and it going to be a force changes a lot. And what I saw up here and heard is some people don't watch the weather as much as they probably should. And these storms, man, that stat that I think is the most fascinating of, we've had 10 hurricanes that have hit the United States that were 150 miles an hour or greater, and 9 of those were tropical storms 3 days out. And most of those are all through the Gulf, other than Andrew. So rapid intensification is when a storm just out of nowhere goes from 50 miles an hour to 150 miles an hour in like 2 days. We saw that last year with Otis in Mexico. Not one forecast predicted that. Acapulco got completely destroyed. And in this heat, and going back to that heat, which we started with, we're making a full circle here, but the reason that the Gulf is so, the potential is that water temperature. And we have to be, alert and know that these things can change in a snap of the finger. And, not everybody's on getting their news anymore. A lot of them are getting it on TikTok, and just, I always tell people they got to be their own weather person. They have, they have to almost understand the weather and, stay on top of it, especially living in Florida.
And that's a really, really good point, Mike, Dan, because I know you're busy. And again, I appreciate your time. It's just follow the forecast, because that initial forecast is going to change. There's no doubt about it. If you're right smack dab in the center, which you're never supposed to, just focus on the one thing, focus on the center. That's the other big thing. And the other change we'll see this year is kind of the changing of the cone a little bit, or the perception, how it looks a little bit. But to keep on checking back, because that initial forecast is going to change, especially until the hurricane hunters can get in there and really dissect what the storm is doing and drop all their instruments and all that stuff. Mike, thank you so much for joining
us. Well, back to that real.
Oh, go. No,
yeah,
go
if you got a second.
Absolutely.
Tons. So another point you just brought out, which is so spot on, and what I'm seeing is so true, is looking back at, spaghetti models, which basically is the outside edge of the cone. But, going back to Irma, there's so much focus on the East Coast, but we had some random outliers that were showing the West Coast. That's where it ended up going. Ian, for example, we had very high percentage of models going north of Tampa. We had the outliers, a lot of European ensembles on the outer edge. So back to your point, 2 to 3 days out, I'm starting to see that we need to be paying attention more to these outliers than the outside of that cone. And even Idalia was heading north, and the last minute it shifted south. So all these storms are not doing exactly what they're supposed to do 2 to 3 days out. So, definitely, if you're not in the center of that cone, I'm going to make a point this year to say, it shows storms that say, 2 days out, it pretty much didn't go where it was supposed to go. And there's so much emotion. And I think that's the other thing I'm going to try to, even with myself, is we look for those track changes. I'm like, oh, it was a 20-mile shift to the west. And, the emotions of every 6-hour NHC update, we all do it. It's like, oh, it shifted west. Oh, it shifted east. But sometimes it doesn't matter, because the storm's so large. When Ian was supposed to go to the Panhandle, there was such a relief in Tampa. I was just hearing people like, yeah. And think about the people at Fort Myers. They're like, oh, this is nothing. And then 3 days later, it hits on Wednesday. So we just got to pay attention to that outside edge. And the last thing is the cone, like you said. I love the fact, so new this year, as obviously too, but having those watches and warnings are now going to be placed inland over that cone, taking less. I think it's going to make the cone less apparent, but you're going to see these watches and warnings now through the state. I think it's going to open eyes up a little bit to say, oh, wow, here's the cone, but we're in hurricane warning way to the south, so I think it's going to be a good way to message people.
Absolutely, yeah. I was talking to Jamie Rome of the NHC, and that's their hope, to have these bright colors over everywhere. And again, if that was the case back in when Ian, and I would imagine, I know they've been trying to finagle the cone for a long time, but I would imagine that was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, a really big straw, unfortunately. They're like, hey, we need to keep these people on guard because of that and these conditions, the impacts, as they always talk about at the Hurricane Center.
Yeah, and back to Ian, I could ramble all day, that. But
hey,
so
I love it,
we had a focus that year on a couple things. One was it was going to hit on Friday in the Panhandle, but the talking point was it was going to weaken because we had a cold front coming down, shallow shelf waters, cooler waters, So you heard the fact, it's going to weaken, it's going to hit on Friday. That was kind of the tone,
Mm-hmm.
So it. 2 days before that, even on the cone, it was a major hurricane on Wednesday. So when it turned, Yeah, I mean, locals down there told me the same thing. It's like, oh crap, they're in panic mode because they're thinking Friday, now it's
Right.
Wednesday, and they're thinking hurricane, now it's Cat 4. So that was a really weird. No fault to the NHC because the way the peninsula of Florida is, when it turned early, it hit 2 days earlier, and that was a really weird wake up call. Like, I don't think anybody realized that down there. Like, oh my God, it turned, so now we got panic mode.
Right.
It's how fast things could change, from what they thought.
No, that's really important. That if it's going to obviously hit further south, that means it speeds up the time. But again, when you let the guard down, maybe not let it down, but maybe stop paying attention because you get that false sense of calm whenever it looks like the storm's going away from you. That's where you start to get into some bigger problems.
Yeah, we learn a lot. I mean, it's not
Yeah, for
perfect. That's
sure.
why the weather's great. You never know.
Absolutely.
I always joke. I'm like, we're all right 50% of the time.
There you go.
That's
Hopefully, it's
all.
higher than that.
Yeah, 51. We
There you go.
strive. That was my joke. That was my joke this weekend with the guys up here. At least with the rain, they were relying on me to tell them when it was going to rain and lightning. I'm like, oh my God. Yeah, I want to say the hurricanes. Trying to predict Florida weather is impossible sometimes.
It is impossible. And Gabriel says on the chat, Irma was a big one for sure. A lot of people saying hi out there, Mike, and
Hey,
on the bringing in the comments here. Mike, I know you've got a lot going on. I know you need to get back home. Thank you so much for tuning in to the live stream. We'd love to have you back on the show
yep.
as we get deeper into hurricane season. This was a lot of
Yeah.
fun.
Anytime, man. Anytime. If you're wondering, this is my daughter's Jeep, by the way. The family refused to take my storm chaser to Panama, so she went to Ron
That thing is
John's
cool,
and
though.
TikTok. Well, they I guess that's the latest TikTok thing, is putting stickers on your roof. So if you're wondering, I'm not really a Jeep guy. I'm more of a Chevy Silverado guy.
There you go. There
But
you go.
it's been cool. But
No,
thanks for
no.
having me. Really appreciate it, man.
Hey, man, love your insight.
Definitely.
Thank you so much. Again, that's obviously Mike from Mike's Weather Page. You can find him on Facebook. You probably know where he is already. And again, thank you, Mike, for tuning in. We'll catch you soon. Hopefully to talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Really appreciate it.
God.
Appreciate
All
it.
right.
Talk soon, for sure. Safe travels back.
All right. All right. Thank you, buddy. See
You
ya.
got it. See you, man. Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye. Bye.
All right, so Mike, obviously great. I want to thank him again for taking the time to join Tropics Watch Live again. We're here on the Just Weather page, the Click Orlando page, and, of course, News 6 Plus. A lot of good stuff, of course. Mike's gone through a lot of hurricanes. He's seen a lot of stuff and traveled through there as well. But the big thing is that heat content, and that's one of the things we were talking about, the higher potential for rapid intensification. One last thing before we go. I kind of want to show it's only the second time since 2014 that we've gone without a preseason storm, and we're off to a quiet, that Q word, start to the season. Now, that means nothing. Of course, 2004 took a while to get going. We all know what happened in Florida. One of the reasons for that is the Pacific Basin really can't compete with the Atlantic Basin, or vice versa. And I want to show you here the Pacific Basin. Let me turn on my little dabber here so we can measure the water. Need a second for it to load. But the water temperature in the in the Eastern Pacific right now is just a little bit warmer than the water temperature in the Atlantic, even though the Atlantic is boiling, so to speak. We're talking about temperatures right around 90 degrees. So what we're dealing with anyway, with El Nino still hanging on, and with these water temperatures near 90, we're likely going to see the action in the Eastern Pacific. So while the Eastern Pacific starts to turn out some storms, the Atlantic will likely remain quiet. Now, there's something, and you can read this in the Tropics Watch newsletter, by the way, that comes out. I'll bring this full if you want to sign up for that. And again, we are doing Tropics Watch Live every Monday at 11 o'clock through hurricane season, and you're also going to get a newsletter with this. It kind of recaps some things, shares my thoughts, and you're going to get that newsletter to your inbox. So if you like to be kind of kept up to date on that, you can scan the QR code on your screen, and if you're watching this on your phone, you can go to clickorlando.com/newsletters and go there and then find the Tropics Watch newsletter. We have a bunch of newsletters on Click Orlando, so if you have other kind of interests that you like, sign up for those as well. But you can put your email in. That is, of course, a free newsletter. But one of the things there, again, the competing basins. So while we're quiet in the short term, that might start to change by the middle of June, that Central American gyre. Mike and I talked about that a little bit, and it looks like we're going to have an MJO passage, the Madden-Julian oscillation, which we break more down in the newsletter that's going to be coming out a little bit later today. So make sure you sign up for that. But that's going to be the catalyst, I think, to start getting things going a little bit on the Atlantic side, mainly in the Caribbean, mainly in the Gulf of Mexico as well. So that's going to be something that we watch going forward, at least for the third to fourth week of June. So just an early kind of heads up there. Of course, there's no way of knowing where those could go and anything. So anyway, we're going to be talking about that, of course, as we get there. Braden's Weather, hey, thanks so much for joining the stream. I'm glad you liked it. Thank you so much, Gabriel, for joining the stream as well. Really appreciate that. A lot of questions about if Florida is going to get a hurricane, and that's just, it's impossible to know that at this stage in the game. Certainly, we stick out. Certainly, with what we were talking about with the potential for the Bermuda High to be further west, we're at least going to be in play uncomfortably through the season, especially once we get into July and really August and September. But nonetheless, hopefully we can do some dodging, if you will, getting deeper into the season, and these things curve. Of course, they've almost have a mind of their own a little bit. Hopefully that Bermuda High at the time that they're out there kind of moves back over closer to the east of Bermuda, closer to the Azores, and helps us steer things out and safely out at sea. So that's what we can all hope. Alrighty, guys, thank you a ton for tuning in to Tropics Watch Live. Again, we hang out every Monday at 11 o'clock in the morning to talk about the tropics, why it's quiet, why it's active, what could be happening, and what are kind of the mechanisms scientifically, meteorologically, if you're into that stuff, into the science and into the meteorology of the tropics, and of course, what could potentially impact you down the road. It certainly looks like a busy year for the Caribbean. La Niñas tend to be more impactful for the Caribbean in Gulf. We've showed that a lot on the channels with past videos as well, showing the different tracks that kind of roll through, unfortunately, the Caribbean and Gulf once we shift into La Nina, which is expected a little bit deeper into the hurricane season. And again, I just mentioned this. If you want another way to stay up to date on the tropics, the Tropics Watch newsletter is there. It is free. ClickOrlando.com/newsletters, or you can scan that QR code. Thank you guys a ton for tuning in. It is quiet now. We'll talk about more, again, in the newsletter when things can go start to pick up a little bit, but hopefully we keep things quiet all season long. That'd be nice. Alrighty, guys, thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you soon.